The whole point of the education was to learn. And if, we didn't insist on that, you wouldn't have knowledge, basically. That relativism in that sense, and a lot of Americans feel this way too, don't they? That relativism means you don't believe in anything, right? If you follow Einstein, which I think, remember, Einstein really gives us the theory of relativity, right? Which is not just physics. In physics, the context is that speed of light is the only constant, and as a result, time is relative, and any model that we create of the universe is relative to the particular perspective of the model, as opposed to the heliocentric view, the geocentric view, the vacuocentric view. Instead, you get this, time-space cone that says you're here, and so the universe looks like this to you, and looks like this to you, and maybe we're close enough, by a few feet that our universes are close, overlapping in some respects, and so on. But so the idea of relativity is in physics, and Einstein didn't invent that. It's like always been this kind of constant back and forth issue. You get people like Euclid that feel like it's a Euclidean plane, that you can make a map of the universe and every point in it is stable in that map. Or you could be like Leibniz, who feels like it's an expanding universe, right? Which that's actually the point of view most physicists have today, is that we have an expanding universe. And so everything is relative not only to your point of view in time and space, but time and space have changed over time. So, the way the Earth was 5 billion years ago, well, maybe it wasn't, etc. Right? That's pretty common. A pretty common point of view. And now the thing is, that doesn't mean that truth doesn't pertain to anything, because and here's the thing that I think gets most people, that confuses them, is that if you think truth is relative to a context, you have to remember that contexts are relatively stable depending on the type of context they are. So that, our body temperatures ought to be what, 98.5? Something like that? 98.6 for all humans? You guys don't know? Do you? What? We need Amanda here. She's the emergency room nurse, I guess, that could tell us, because you guys take your temperatures, right?
98.6.
What is it?
98.6.
98.6. Actually, that can vary. My wife's is usually lower than that.
It says some studies have shown that the normal body temperature can have a wide range from 97 to 99 degrees.
Yeah, hers is around 97 something. But believe it or not, that means she has cold feet. And don't ask me how I know that. That's a little, Well, we have been married over 50 years. I imagine you would figure I would know that. So what a pragmatist would say, and the whole argument about warranted assertions and warranted assertability and so on, and the argument between Rorty and Putnam, if you've heard some of this discussion here, is that how much emphasis are you putting on interpretation? For Rorty, interpretation is like, literature. If I have a play, here's Faust, what's the meaning of Faust? Well, that's an improper question, really, because Faust might mean something to you, and something else to you, and something else to you. And when you say, "Oh, well, it means this to me," and I go, "No, that's not it." No, that would be just dumb, right? You have all different interpretations of Faust, and in fact, it feels like it's a richer environment when we have a whole bunch of different interpretations, some of which we had not thought of. And we think, wow, that's really interesting. And by the way, this was going on at the time that Goethe wrote this, and so we ought to think of it as, through his eyes, that he was probably concerned about this aspect of things. Wow, that's enlightening. That helps us make our experience of the play richer, than it would have been otherwise. And that's the way we treat literature. But what about history? You think history is relative? I mean, there are some things you have to study in history class, and you get a true or false test. And, Napoleon crowned himself emperor of, what did he call himself, emperor of France? Because he had an empire, and he didn't crown himself emperor until, so what did he call it?
The Emperor of the French.
The Emperor of the French. Okay.
He was
Interesting.
French.
Yeah, but they actually had a lot more than France when they had parts of Italy, Spain.
Not for
Which one is that?
5'6".
Yeah, the little corporal, they call him. But so all of those things that we just looked up and everything, that's considered historical and true. If you said, no, Napoleon was 6'7", you're wrong, right? That was Peter the Great. Or, maybe he was even 7 something, I don't know, Peter the Great. Which is why they called him great. Great meant tall at the time. Veliki, giant. Velikan is giant in Russian, and Velik means tall. So Russian is actually pretty simple. Reading Harry Potter in Russian compared to French and German and English, you think, wow, the book is smaller even because they don't use as many words to say the same things because there's a lot less nuance.
Can you read Russian cursive?
Duh? Yeah, I used to have to write Russian cursive. I was a Russian linguist in the army. You didn't do that stuff. Didn't I tell you that? No? Yeah.
Never mind.
You were talked about how you had to learn a lot of languages.
Yeah, we were tested on 16 every year, the whole time I was in the military.
I mean, that's a really valuable trait. Probably not now, but it's still fun to have.
Well, I mean, there's Francis Fukuyama, the paper that I just read from one of the students the other day, pointed out that he spoke, besides English, he spoke French, German, ancient Greek, and Latin. I think there was one other one that he was, so Fukuyama also worked for the RAND Corporation, was an advisor to, I believe it was President Reagan. He was for a while he was referred to as a neocon, part of the neo-conservatives. You've ever heard of that? Kind of following from the Chicago School, where they had a whole pool of folks that were neocons. Um, but then when George Bush W. Did his attack on Iraq, he backed out of that group. I mean, it's not like he cheated and said, I'm no longer part of the team. No, but he criticized them because they thought that they could build Iraq into a democracy from the top down. And he wrote a book at the time explaining that no, democracies can only be built from the bottom up. You have to educate people to become voters who want their rights, and then they create a democracy. But if you take a country that's basically never had that kind of education and people have never learned that way of thinking, and you tell them, okay, you're a democracy now, you get to vote for your leaders, etc. No, that doesn't work. That will be a dismal failure. And in fact, he was absolutely right about that. Instead of being able to build a democracy like in a couple of years from the top down by decreeing, okay, you are now a democracy, here's your new constitution, you have an election on Friday. That doesn't work. What you have to do is spend maybe 3 generations of people having an educational process that teaches people the things that enable them to think of themselves as having a self, a modern self. They can desire and believe that they have rights, that governments are created in order for them to have rights and protect their rights and so on. That's, that you look at our history, that's the social contract that started with Hobbes and Locke and Jefferson and the others, kind of took that and created the United States as an experiment in democracy. And we're still working on that, as you know. And how does it work? Well, you have to have people raised to think of themselves as a self that has a self-reflective internal soul of some sort that enables them to be the reason that governments are created, to protect that identity, etc. And we're still trying to figure out how that might actually work. It doesn't work very well in a lot of different ways. There's different kinds of democracies, so-called. Frankly, it almost looks like the British system works much better in a lot of ways. Parliamentary system, as opposed to a republic of the sort that we have. But that'll never change. We're not ever going to decide, instead of having an elected president, we're going to have a parliament that will elect a prime minister. No, that's not going to happen. And yet, as a result of that, you get a much quicker turnaround time between the way people's views change depending on changing circumstances. Like we saw this just recently with Brexit and the reaction to Brexit and what that did and how they've reacted to that, so that they've in a sense backed off really quite a lot on what Brexit meant, etc. All that's been fascinating if you've had the chance to watch it and compare it to an American democracy where we're stuck. We've got this dichotomy between parties that want absolutely opposite things, and we don't really seem to have a way of getting around that. Parliament gets over that. They have ways of, they never get totally stuck. They'll make a decision one way or the other, try it for a while, and maybe completely, Boris, the Boris Johnson, the one that was in the debate with Mary Beard that I suggested you watch. I don't know if you watched it or not, but I asked the quiz question, who won? Boris was, of course, the prime minister later, at the time of that debate, he was the mayor of London, which was fun. You know, I still think it's hilarious. You know, he did some goofy things. Some people compare him to Trump because of the way he does his hair and his, you know, character, you know, somewhat. But actually, he's an intelligent person with, you know, like a really terrific schooling or educational background. Speaks Greek. I mean, if that's a good thing, I don't know if Trump, does Donald J. Trump speak any other languages besides English? I don't think so. I love this. He checks immediately. I pose a
I wanna
question.
know.
I don't think so. I don't think he really speaks English that well, actually.
Very true.
Plus, what is English? You know?
Yeah. English is a unique language.
It appears, this is word for word, it appears that President Donald Trump only speaks English despite the fact that members of his family are multilingual, not just bilingual.
His wives have always spoken other languages.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah.
What language does Melania speak?
I think she speaks French.
Melania? She's, I think, Serbian.
You can definitely hear her accent sometimes.
Yeah,
For sure.
yeah. I'm thinking of Ivana. Ivana was Czech. That was the earlier wife. The one
She
that,
might be Slovenian.
Slovenian, that's it, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, all his wives have been immigrants, you know, which is why he's so against immigration.
She actually speaks 5 languages.
Oh,
English, Italian, French, German, and Slovene.
And she's beautiful, according to, you know, there you go. I mean, theory of relativity, who decides what's beautiful? This is the longest my beard has ever been. And am I getting compliments from my wife? No. She's like, when are you gonna cut that thing? You know, etc. I felt like I was on a particular discussion topic and I got lost at a point. But we don't have any real goal except to be entertained and think about philosophy today. But so that conflict over relativity and pragmatism, I think is solved